I want to talk about the number of people killed in Iraq, but I want to start with a personal story to underscore why most of these deaths you never hear about and you never will. There's a man that I met in Bakuba. I talk about him in my book several times. His name's Sheikh Adnan. I met him when I was in there doing interviews at the very end of my first trip, actually. So this is back in January 2004. And then we became friends and stayed in touch. He's a Friday speaker at his mosque, a very religious man, an Islamic scholar at Baghdad University, and had actually written a little book called Jesus and the Holy Quran, because he thought it'd be a good idea to try to have something to offer U.S. soldiers when they came into the country to show similarities between Islam and Christianity rather than the differences being harped on by the media. So this gives you an idea of the kind of guy that Sheikh Adnan is. And I'd come to Baghdad and be working, and he'd stop by my hotel after he'd gone to his classes at Baghdad University, and or come in from Bakuba straight just to bring me home-cooked meals from his wife, because he knew I was just eating like street kebabs all the time. And just a lovely guy. And then when it got too dangerous for me to keep going back into Iraq, he started coming out to Syria or Jordan to visit me. And this past summer, when I was over in Syria reporting on the refugee situation, he came out to visit me again, and we spent time. And then I came home from the trip, and he had come out to visit me in Syria with a friend of his who also spoke good English. And a couple of months after I got home, I heard from his friend. I got an email, and he said, well, what happened, Sheikh Adnan had gone to visit his parents, as he does every week, and he was coming back home in his car, and he had his 10-year-old daughter with him, and they were pulled over by a car full of gunmen. And they were pulled over, and they sent the little girl home, and they said, well, we're just going to take your father. We have to ask him some questions. And so two of them got in the car with guns on him, and they drove him away in his car, and that's it. And that's it. And it's, and basically, when you look at the news coming out of Iraq every day, and you see, well, the Iraqi police uncover 12 bodies in a field outside of Bakuba, or scores of bodies wash up on the beach of the Tigris River. He's one of those. So they basically rarely, if ever, makes the media. No one will ever see or hear from or know what happened, and that's the situation. Most of the deaths don't get reported in the media at all. And so when we look at the overall situation, with that story in mind, multiplied countless numbers of times, that's why when we have something like the report that was published in the British peer-reviewed medical journal, The Lancet, in October 2006, otherwise known as the Lancet report, that found 655,000 Iraqis, or 2.5% of the total population of the country, had died as a direct result of the invasion and occupation. That when that first came out, that figure shocked a lot of people. But people like me and other journalists who have spent enough time in Iraq to see the apocalyptic nature of the occupation and how violent and completely out of control it is, it wasn't that shocking, actually. And especially when me and I don't know how many of my colleagues know so many Sheikh Adnans that type of thing has happened to. So, but it is incredibly high as that figure is. We have updated figures. We have a group in the U.S. called Just Foreign Policy that has taken a figure. They based their figure primarily on the Lancet study, and then extrapolated information from UN data, media reports, etc. And they've come up with a new number, and that number is significantly higher. And one of the main reasons it's significantly higher is because the legwork for that study published in the Lancet, that was published October 2006, which is already over a year out of date. But another reason is because the legwork for that study took place in July 2005. So we basically have no new data on the number of dead from July 2005 until now. In between July 2005 and now, we've seen periods of some of the heaviest violence of the entire occupation. And so Just Foreign Policy's figure is now over 1.1 million Iraqis have died. There's a similar type of organization in the UK, a polling group that did their study, and their study is actually 1.2 million dead Iraqis. And in the United States, a country with a population now a bit over 300 million people, I haven't done this in Canada, so I can't give you something a little bit more tangible, closer to home, to really try to drive this home. But in the United States, if we were going to show comparable casualties of a similar percentage, of the same percentage of people that would have died in the United States, it would mean that every person in Atlanta, Denver, Boston, Seattle, Milwaukee, Fort Worth, Baltimore, San Francisco, Dallas, and Philadelphia would be dead. Every single person. And when we consider the fact that Iraq's population, when the invasion was launched in March 2003, was 27 million people, it's now around 23 million people. Because, as I said before, there's, according to the UNHCR, there's a minimum of 2.25 million people internally displaced within Iraq, refugees within their own country. There's at least another 2.25 million that have fled the country altogether. And these are very, very conservative figures. There's a minimum number of 3 million people that have been significantly wounded. And according to an Oxfam International report published this last July, 4 million Iraqis are in dire need of emergency aid. For example, 70% of the country does not have access to potable water. So the 4 million, and these are not the refugees. So the 4 million, these are people that if they don't get water, food, and medical attendance as they need it soon, they're literally at risk for their lives. So when we add all these numbers up and the number of dead, that means that over 50% of the total population of Iraq are either displaced, wounded, in need of emergency assistance, or dead. But things are getting better in Iraq if you listen to the corporate media.